The first thing you notice is the silence. Not the good kind, not the peaceful, early morning quiet of a world still sleeping. This was a hollow silence. The kind that fills a space where a life used to be. It had weight. It pressed in on you from the walls, from the dust motes dancing in the single beam of sunlight cutting through the drawn blinds. I stood in the doorway of my childhood home, the scent of antiseptic and stale air, a stark contrast to the memory of cinnamon and baked bread. My duffel bag, still caked with the fine dust of Al-Assad, felt impossibly heavy on my shoulder. 48 hours ago, I was Major Evelyn Reed, United States Army, coordinating air-to-ground support over Anbar province. Now, I was just Evie, standing in a house that was no longer a home. I had come back unannounced. A surprise. I'd managed to get a jump on my scheduled leave, pulling strings I rarely even acknowledged I had. I wanted to see my mother. Her messages had become less frequent, her words more tired. My siblings, Marcus and Chloe, assured me everything was fine. She's just having a low week, Evie. Don't worry your head about it. You focus on staying safe. Their texts were always so placid, so reassuring, so utterly useless. The key was not under the mat. That was the first alarm bell. For 30 years, the spare key had lived under a faded welcome mat shaped like a sunflower. It was a family constant, a small, reliable truth. Its absence was a scream in the quiet. I found a loose window at the back of the house, the one near the overgrown rose bushes my mother had loved so much. The latch gave way with a tired groan. I slipped inside, my boots silent on the worn linoleum of the utility room. My training made the entry quiet, second nature. Move with purpose. Observe. Assess. The house was clean, too clean, impersonally clean, the kind of clean that comes from a paid service, not from a life being lived. There were no newspapers on the coffee table, no half-finished mug of tea in the sink. The family photos on the mantelpiece were perfectly aligned, coated in a thin, uniform layer of dust. I ran a finger over a picture of the three of us as kids, perched on our grandfather's lap. Marcus with his smug, confident grin. Chloe, already perfecting her pageant smile. And me, squinting into the sun, my arm thrown around the old man's neck. A different lifetime. I called out, "Mom?" The silence answered. It was a thick, cloying thing. Her bedroom door was closed. I knocked. A soft, formal rap. "Mom, it's Evie, I'm home." Nothing. I tried the knob. It was locked. Another alarm, louder this time. Why would her door be locked from the inside? A cold dread, colder than any fear I'd felt on a night patrol, began to snake its way up my spine. I didn't waste time. I put my shoulder to the door, a technique I'd learned at Quantico for urban breaching. The frame was old wood, the lock flimsy. It splintered on the second impact, the door swinging inward with a sharp crack. The room was empty, the bed was stripped, the mattress encased in a crinkling plastic cover. The air was cold, sterile. All of her personal effects were gone. Her books, her reading glasses, the worn quilt she'd had since her own mother passed. It was a sanitized void. I stood there, in the center of that nothingness, and tried to make it make sense. It was like a cleared-out barracks room after a unit rotation, an orderly, emotionless erasure. My eyes scanned the room, threat assessment, information gathering. On the bare nightstand, a single object remained. A hospice care pamphlet. The corner was dog-eared. Below it, a faint ring where a glass of water had been sweating. It was the only sign that a person had been here at all. I picked up the pamphlet. The generic calming blue and white graphics seemed to mock the sterile horror of the room. I flipped it over. A nurse's name was scribbled on the back, Sarah, and a phone number. But before I could process that, I saw her cell phone lying next to the lamp base, plugged into the wall. It felt like an artifact left behind. I picked it up. The screen lit up with a notification. It was a social media tag, a picture, from Chloe's account. My thumb moved on instinct, opening the notification. The image was a blast of neon and forced joy. Marcus and Chloe, arms slung around each other, raising champagne flutes. They were in a ridiculously opulent suite, the Las Vegas Strip glittering through the window behind them. They were grinning, their teeth impossibly white. Below the picture, Chloe's caption dotted with celebratory emojis. Sometimes you just need a break from it all, living our best life and sending all our love and strength to Mom back home. Vegas strong for Mom, family first, making memories. The post was 3 hours old. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something inside me went perfectly, terrifyingly still. The grief, the fear, the confusion, it all collapsed inward, compressing into a single, dense point of cold, clear fury. The noise of the world fell away. The thrumming of the refrigerator, the distant whine of a lawnmower, the beating of my own heart, all gone. There was only the image on the screen and the silent, empty room. That was the moment the switch flipped. The part of me that was a daughter, a sister, receded. The part that was Major Reed took command. My mission parameters had just become crystal clear. Emotion is a liability in the field. It gets you or your people killed. You box it up, you put it on a shelf, and you deal with it later. Or never. In that sterile room, I boxed up 35 years of complicated family dynamics, of trying to earn a love that was conditional at best, and I put it away. It was replaced by a calm, absolute resolve. My target was no longer an insurgent cell in a dusty village. The objective was simpler. It was justice. It was honor. Things my grandfather, Colonel Thomas Reed, had taught me were the only currency with any real value. Things my siblings had cashed in for a weekend in Vegas. I pulled out my own phone. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. A practiced cadence. I didn't call the nurse named Sarah yet. I didn't call the hospital. My first call was to my lawyer, David Chen, a former JAG officer I'd served with at Fort Bragg. He was sharp, relentless, and understood the concept of loyalty in a way my own blood never had. He answered on the second ring. "Evie? You stateside?" "David," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any inflection. "It's time. Execute the Valhalla Protocol." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Just a beat of silence. David knew what that phrase meant. We had established it years ago, after my grandfather passed. It was a contingency plan for a day I hoped would never come, a day of absolute familial failure. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Once we start this, Evie, there's no going back. It's scorched earth." I looked at the picture on my mother's phone again, the empty smiles, the glib hashtag. I thought of the stripped bed and the locked door. "Burn it all," I said. After I hung up with David, I went to my grandfather's study. It was the one room in the house that Marcus and Chloe never touched. It was a sanctuary of leather-bound books, polished brass, and the faint, pleasant scent of old paper and gun oil. It was where the Colonel had taught me about strategy, about honor, about looking at a problem from every angle before you commit to a course of action. He had seen the weakness in his other grandchildren long before I was willing to admit it. "They are soft, Evie," he'd told me once, cleaning his old service pistol at this very desk. "They think the world owes them comfort, a dangerous assumption. The world owes you nothing but a grave. Everything else, you earn." He had prepared me for this. Behind a row of military history books, there was a small, nearly invisible safe set into the wall. I spun the dial, the numbers coming to me from memory. The lock clicked open with a satisfying thud. Inside was a heavy steel lockbox. On a simple label affixed to the top, my grandfather's neat block handwriting read, "Valhalla Protocol, for Evelyn only." I lifted it out and placed it on his desk. Inside was a neatly organized file. Every document was sealed in a plastic sleeve. There was a revised version of his last will and testament. A durable power of attorney for my mother's affairs, signed by her in a shaky hand 2 years ago and notarized, a separate document granting me sole medical proxy, and a thick envelope with my name on it. I opened the envelope. His letter was brief and to the point, like all his field reports. "Evelyn, if you are reading this, it is because your brother and sister have finally shown their true colors. I am sorry. I am sorry I could not shield you and your mother from their selfishness. I am sorry that you will be the one to clean up this mess, but you are the only one with the strength to do it. The enclosed documents will give you the legal authority to do what is necessary. They are ironclad. Chen knows the sequence. Do not hesitate. Do not allow their crocodile tears to sway you. Their weakness is a disease, and it must be cauterized. Your mother deserves dignity. You deserve peace. This family's honor, what's left of it, rests with you. Duty first, always. Colonel Thomas Reed. At the bottom of the box was a small USB drive. I knew what was on it. He had shown me once, years ago. My final volley, he had called it, with a grim little smile. His insurance policy against the character flaws he saw so clearly in his other heirs. I sat there for a long time, the lockbox open on the desk, the letter in my hand. He had seen it all coming. He had armed me for a war I never wanted to fight, against an enemy I was supposed to love. The sadness I had boxed away threatened to break free. The sadness for my mother, for the grandfather I missed with a physical ache, for the ruin of my own family, but I pushed it back down. The time for grief would come later. Right now, there was a mission. First, locate my mother. I called the number for the nurse, Sarah. She answered, her voice warm but professional. I identified myself, Major Evelyn Reed. I'm Catherine Reed's daughter. There was an audible sigh of relief on the other end. Oh, thank God, she said. We've been trying to reach your brother and sister for 2 days. Your mother took a turn for the worse. She's at the Oakwood Hospice Center, room 312. She's been asking for you. 2 days. They had been partying in Vegas for 2 days while my mother was in hospice, asking for me. The coldness inside me sharpened to a razor's edge. I'm on my way, I said. The drive to Oakwood was a blur. I operated on autopilot. The sterile smell of the hospice was different from the house. Here, it was a smell of active care, of quiet dignity. I found room 312. My mother was so small in the hospital bed, a frail bird lost in a sea of white sheets. An IV line snaked into her thin arm. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes, clouded as they were, lit up when she saw me. Evie, she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. I took her hand. It was all bone and paper-thin skin. I'm here, Mom. I'm home. She smiled, a faint, fleeting thing. I knew you'd come, she said. And then her eyes drifted closed. She was exhausted, but she was calm. For the first time since I'd landed, I felt a flicker of something other than ice and anger. It was a profound, aching love for this woman who had tried her best, who had been let down by the 2 children who stayed home while the one she sent to war was the only one who answered the call. I sat with her for hours, holding her hand, telling her about my flight home, about the ridiculously green trees, about anything but the truth of the empty house and her other children's betrayal. I was her shield now. Nothing and no one would hurt her again. While she slept, I made calls. I spoke to the hospice administrator. I faxed over the medical proxy from my grandfather's lockbox. I made it clear. From this moment on, all decisions, all communications, went through me and only me. Marcus and Chloe were to be given no information. They were, in effect, erased from the equation. The first frantic text from Chloe arrived around 2 a.m., a series of question marks, followed by, "Our card for room service was just declined. What is going on? Marcus is freaking out." David was efficient. The first step of the Valhalla protocol was to freeze the joint accounts my siblings had been bleeding dry. All assets my mother and grandfather had were now locked down under the authority of the durable power of attorney I now held. Their lifeline, the one they had used to fund their break from it all, had just been severed. I didn't reply. I put my phone on silent and set it on the table beside my mother's bed. The barrage started in earnest about 30 minutes later. Calls and texts. First from Chloe, then from Marcus. They came one after another, a frantic digital bombardment. "Evie, answer your phone." "This isn't funny. The hotel is threatening to kick us out." "Did you do this? You must have done something. Mom would never cut us off." Then the tone shifted from accusatory to manipulative. "We were just taking a few days to recharge, Evie. It's been so stressful, you have no idea what we've been through. Mom wouldn't want this. She would want us all to get along. You're tearing this family apart." I read the messages with a detached curiosity. It was like observing an enemy's predictable tactical response. They were probing for a weakness, an emotional opening. They were trying to deploy the weapons that had always worked on me before: guilt, obligation, the desperate need for family harmony. But the woman they were trying to reach was no longer there. Major Reed was in command, and she did not negotiate with emotionally bankrupt hostiles. My silence was my counteroffensive. It was a declaration that their rules no longer applied. Their current side drama, manipulation, feigned victimhood was no longer accepted here. The more they screamed into the void, the more their power evaporated. They needed my engagement, my anger, my tears. They needed me to play the game. By refusing to even acknowledge the board, I was invalidating their entire strategy. By dawn, I had received 47 texts and 87 missed calls. I cataloged them, taking screenshots. Evidence. Data points in a long, sad history of dereliction of duty. My mother passed away peacefully just after sunrise. I was holding her hand. Her last breath was a quiet sigh. The world became very still again, but this time it wasn't the cold stillness of rage. It was a profound, heartbreaking calm. My mission to protect her was over. The next phase was about to begin. I stayed for an hour, making the initial arrangements with the hospice staff, who were kind and respectful. They spoke to me as an adult, as the one in charge. No one asked where my siblings were. They seemed to already know the answer. The truth of who shows up is always written on the faces of the people in the room. I finally called Chloe back as I walked out into the cool morning air. She answered on the first ring, her voice a shrill torrent of panic and accusation. "Evelyn, finally! What the hell is going on? We're stranded here. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? You have to turn the cards back on right now." I let her tirade wash over me. I waited for her to run out of breath. When she finally paused, I spoke. My voice was calm and level. "Mom is dead," I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. I had deployed a tactical nuke into her self-pity party. "She died an hour ago," I continued in that same flat tone. "Here, at the Oakwood Hospice Center, where she was for the last 2 days, while you were posting hashtags. The funeral will be on Friday. I suggest you find a way home." I hung up before she could respond. I didn't need to hear the manufactured grief, the excuses that were already forming on her tongue. It was irrelevant data. The next few days were a blur of logistics. I met with the funeral director. I wrote my mother's obituary, focusing on her kindness, her love of gardening, her quiet strength. I did not mention Marcus or Chloe. When the director asked about surviving family, I listed myself and my grandfather deceased. He gave me a strange look, but I simply stared back until he nodded and made the notation. I arranged for a simple, dignified service. David handled the rest. He sent a formal, registered letter to the hotel in Las Vegas where Marcus and Chloe were staying. It informed them that as per the legal and binding documents I held, they were no longer beneficiaries or executors of the Reed family estate or trust. It included a one-time wire transfer of $500 designated for a bus ticket home. It was a brutal, elegant move. Not enough for a flight, not enough for another night in a suite. Enough to get them back, but with a long, uncomfortable journey to reflect on their choices. They arrived back the day before the funeral. They didn't come to the house. They couldn't. I had already had the locks changed. They went to a cheap motel on the edge of town. They tried to call. They sent texts filled with venom and threats of legal action. I ignored them all. I was building a wall of silence and procedure around myself, a fortification they had no weapons to breach. The confrontation I knew was inevitable came a few hours after I returned from the funeral home, having finalized the last of the arrangements. I was in my grandfather's study, going through his old files, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a furious, insistent mashing of the button. I looked at the security camera feed I'd had installed. Marcus and Chloe stood on the porch, their faces contorted with rage and a kind of bewildered indignation. They looked haggard, their Vegas tans already starting to fade into a sickly yellow. I did not answer the door. Instead, I called David. "They're here." "Let them wait," he said. "The meeting is at my office. Tomorrow, 1000 hours. I sent them the summons an hour ago. They'll be there." I watched them on the camera for another 10 minutes. They shouted my name. Marcus kicked a decorative pot, shattering it. Chloe was crying, but they were tears of fury, not of sorrow. It was the tantrum of a spoiled child whose favorite toy has been taken away. Finally, they left, peeling out of the driveway in their least luxury sedan. The next morning, I put on my Class A uniform. The Army service uniform, dark blue jacket, light blue trousers, a chest full of ribbons that told the story of my life. My grandfather had always said, never underestimate the psychological impact of showing up in full dress. It tells them you are not there to negotiate. You are there to issue terms. David's office was on the top floor of a downtown building. The conference room had a large mahogany table and a view of the entire city. It felt like a command center. I arrived 10 minutes early. David was already there, a stack of files in front of him. He nodded at my uniform. "Good choice," he said. Marcus and Chloe arrived precisely at 10. They had brought their own lawyer, a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a daytime television commercial, with a slick smile and an expensive, ill-fitting suit. They saw me, and their expressions hardened. Chloe was dressed in black, a performance of mourning that was deeply offensive. Marcus just looked like a cornered animal. Their lawyer started, his voice oozing a practiced, synthetic sympathy. "Mr. Chen, Major Reed, this is a time for family, for grieving. My clients are deeply hurt and confused by Major Reed's aggressive and precipitous actions. We are here to contest what appears to be a clear case of undue influence over an elderly parent and to restore my clients to their rightful place as co-executors of their mother's estate." David just listened, his face impassive. When the man was finished, David didn't even look at him. He looked at Marcus and Chloe. "Are you done?" he asked. He then slid 3 thin files across the table, one for each of them and one for their lawyer. "Before you continue with your fictional narrative," David said, his voice cutting through the cloying atmosphere, "I suggest you review these." I watched them open the files. Their faces changed as they read. The first file was a complete accounting of the estate's finances for the past 2 years. David had highlighted every questionable withdrawal. The $5,000 for a resort vacation in Aspen. The $12,000 funneled to one of Marcus's failed business ventures. The steady draining pull of funds for spa days, car leases, and restaurant tabs, all while the bills for their mother's in-home care were being paid late, if at all. It was a meticulous, undeniable record of their greed. The second file contained printed-out screenshots, their social media posts, flaunting their lifestyle, juxtaposed with copies of overdue notices from the medical supply company and the visiting nurse service. It included the final, damning post from Las Vegas. The third file was a single sheet of paper, a copy of the durable power of attorney and the medical proxy. Signed, dated, and notarized. Irrefutable. Their lawyer's slick smile had vanished. He was flipping through the pages, his face growing paler. Marcus threw his file down on the table. "This is an invasion of privacy," he blustered. "You had no right." As the legal holder of your mother's power of attorney, and now as the sole executor of her estate as designated by Colonel Reed's trust, my client had every right, David said calmly. "These are not your private records. This is a record of your mismanagement of your mother's assets while you were acting in a position of trust. It's called fiduciary malfeasance." Chloe started to cry, real tears this time, tears of self-pity. "We loved our mother," she sobbed. "Evie was never here. She was off playing soldier on the other side of the world while we were the ones dealing with everything. We deserved a break. We deserved some compensation for our sacrifice." I had remained silent until that point, but the word sacrifice was a line too far. I stood up. My voice was low, but it filled the room. It was my command voice, the one that brooked no argument. "Sacrifice," I said, the word tasting like poison. "Let me tell you about sacrifice. Sacrifice is your medic bleeding out in the dirt while you try to hold his intestines in. Sacrifice is writing a letter to a young man's parents telling them their son isn't coming home because of a $50 IED. Sacrifice is missing every holiday, every birthday, every moment of your own life for 10 years because you believe in something bigger than your own comfort." I took a step toward the table. They both flinched. "You sacrificed nothing. You were vultures picking over the carcass of this family while it was still alive. You talk about me not being here? I called every week. I sent money from my own pay, which you apparently used. I begged you to hire more help for her, and you told me it was handled. I was serving my country." "You were serving yourselves." I looked at them, one after the other, holding their gaze until they looked away. "You weren't dealing with anything. You were waiting for her to die." The room was silent, except for Chloe's pathetic sniffling. Their lawyer looked at his file, then at his client's. and I could see the moment he realized he had no case. He was holding a losing hand. "Now," David said, leaning forward, "we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. The hard way involves me submitting this evidence of financial elder abuse to the district attorney. I suspect they would be very interested. The easy way is you sign the documents in front of you, which waive any and all claims to the Reed estate and trust, now and forever. You walk away with nothing but the bus money. The choice is yours." Their lawyer immediately started whispering to them. Marcus was shaking his head, his face purple with rage. Chloe was just staring into space, a broken doll. But I knew what would happen. They were cowards. They had always been cowards. The threat of actual legal consequences, of public humiliation, was more terrifying to them than any loss of family. But David wasn't finished. "There is one more thing," he said. He reached under the table and pulled out a laptop. He turned it on and angled the screen toward them. "Before you make your final decision, there's a message for you, from your grandfather." He pressed a key. The face of Colonel Thomas Reed filled the screen. He was in his study, wearing his old uniform, looking directly into the camera. He looked tired, but his eyes were as clear and sharp as I remembered. His voice, recorded 2 years before his death, was steady and strong. "Marcus, Chloe," he began without preamble, "if you are watching this, it means my worst fears have been realized. It means you failed in your most basic duty of care for your own mother. It means you put your own greed and comfort above her well-being, and it means Evelyn has been forced to clean up your mess." He paused, his gaze seeming to pierce right through the screen. "I have watched you both your entire lives. I have seen your jealousy of your sister's discipline, your resentment of her achievements. I have seen your sense of entitlement grow like a weed. You believe you are owed this family's legacy simply by virtue of your birth. You are wrong. A legacy is not inherited, it is earned. Honor is not in a name, it is in your actions when no one is watching." He looked down for a moment, as if collecting his thoughts. "The Reed family trust, and all assets therein, were built on generations of service and sacrifice. It is not a slush fund for your pathetic appetites. Therefore, I have made arrangements. Upon legal confirmation of your mother's passing and a determination of gross negligence on your part, determination I have entrusted to Evelyn, you are to be formally and permanently disinherited. You will receive nothing. The house, the investments, the history, it all passes to the only one of you who understands its true worth. It passes to Major Evelyn Reed." He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes burning with a cold fire. "This is not a punishment, it is a consequence. It is the final report on a lifetime of character failure. You were given every advantage and you squandered it. May God have mercy on your souls, because you will receive none from me." The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute. Chloe was openly weeping now, not with sadness but with the raw, ugly sound of loss. Marcus was white-faced, speechless. His entire world, built on the assumption of a future inheritance, had just been vaporized. Their lawyer slowly, deliberately pushed a pen toward them. They signed. They didn't even read the full document. Their hands shook as they scrawled their signatures, signing away their birthright, signing away their family. When they were done, I stood up. I didn't say another word to them. I nodded once to David. "Thank you, David." "Always, Evie," he said. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard the first, shattered sob from Chloe, a sound of utter defeat. I felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just the quiet, grim finality of a mission accomplished. The cauterization was complete. I spent the next week at my grandfather's house, which was now my house. I methodically cleared out my mother's home, donating most of her belongings to a women's shelter. I kept the photo albums, her worn gardening gloves, and the quilt. I packed them away carefully. The house itself I put on the market. It held too many ghosts, too many bad memories. The silence in my grandfather's house was different. It wasn't the hollow, sterile silence of neglect. It was a silence of peace, of sanctuary. I would sit in his study in the evenings, a cup of coffee in my hand, and just breathe. The war was over. Both of them. A few days later, a package arrived. It was from my first sergeant, Top. He'd heard what happened. Inside was a neatly folded American flag, the kind given to the families of fallen soldiers, though this one had never flown over a Capitol building. It had flown over our forward operating base in Anbar. There was a note. "Ma'am, the boys and I wanted you to have this. Your mother raised a hell of a good soldier. She was one of us. This is the flag that flew the day you got us all home safe. It belongs with you. Your real family is waiting for you when you get back." I held the flag to my chest, and for the first time since I'd landed stateside, I cried. I cried for my mother. I cried for my grandfather. I cried for the family I had lost and the one I had found in the dust and chaos of a foreign war. They were tears of grief, yes, but also of gratitude. He was right. My real family was half a world away, bonded not by blood, but by shared risk and unwavering loyalty. The estate was considerable. My grandfather had been a shrewd investor. I had more than I would ever need. I sat at his desk for a long time, thinking about his words. A legacy is not inherited. It is earned. I called David the next day. I told him to start the paperwork. We were creating a foundation, the Colonel Thomas and Catherine Reed Foundation for Military Families in Crisis. It would provide emergency financial aid to families whose loved ones were deployed. It would help them with childcare, with medical bills, with the simple, crushing logistics of life when a partner or parent is in a war zone. It would ensure no soldier ever had to worry that their family was facing a battle alone back home. The money, the legacy would not be a comfort. It would be a weapon, a tool. It would be used to reinforce the lines to protect those who served. It was the best way, the only way to honor the two people who had taught me what honor truly meant. Today, I am back in his study. The flag from my unit sits in a new display case on the mantel, next to my grandfather's burial flag. The room is quiet. It is a good silence, an earned silence. My siblings have vanished, dissolved into the anonymity they deserve. I hear from a distant cousin that they moved somewhere to the Midwest, chasing another one of Marcus's get-rich-quick schemes. They are a ghost story, a cautionary tale. I learned a hard lesson in that sterile, empty house. Family is not about blood. It's not about a shared name or a common history. It's about who shows up. It's about who stands the post when things get hard. It's about who answers the call in the middle of the night, whether that call comes from a battlefield or a quiet, lonely room in a hospice center. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to scream or posture. It's the quiet, steady discipline of doing the right thing, especially when it's the hardest thing to do. My grandfather taught me that in this room, and my mother taught me that with her quiet strength. Their legacy is safe now. It's being put to work. It's on duty. And for the first time in a very long time, I finally feel at peace. My war is over. I am finally home.